This video tutorial is the first in a series which are designed to help you to get the most out of using camtrapR. camtrapR is a piece of R script which is designed to allow you to summarize and extract data from the metadata of camera trap images, so information such as the camera station, the date and time the picture was taken, and also any species or individual metadata tags that you may have produced. There are a set of tutorials which are available, vignettes they're calling them on CRAN, to help you perform different phases of operation of managing your camera trap images. And if you want to extend yourself on top of what we're doing in this video tutorial, you might choose to have a look at those. Or if you're using camtrapR a bit later on in life, as part of your job or some research project, come back to these and have a look at them, because there's more information in there which we're not dealing with here. So before we commence, as with any new project, I just want to make sure that I've cleared away any objects that might be sitting over in this environment, which might kind of tangle me up a bit later. So I run this line of code, which just clears that environment. So you're going to need these 4 packages installed for everything that we're going to do in camtrapR here. And I've already installed them, so I'm not going to run through that again, but I will just load the libraries for each of them. What's going on? My enter key is a bit sticky. So camtrapR has a lot of dependencies within it, so it can take a little while just for the library to load. So we'll just wait for that to happen. While we're doing that, I'm going to turn this one off because I don't believe that we need it. It was something I needed earlier on. I was playing around with some other functionality which we're not going to use here. But we'll see how we go. We may yet have to come back and load that library. So we need these 2 mapping libraries as well, because as part of this series of video tutorials, I'm going to show you how to create some shape files from the detection maps, shape files and KML files. Now before we go any further, we need to make sure we have ExifTool installed on our machines. If you're viewing this tutorial after the computer workshops, you should have already done that, but for people who are yet to do a computer workshop, make sure you do this. So you can install ExifTool either by searching through Google just for the ExifTool download website, or you can do it within R by installing ExifTool. I've already installed it, so I'm not going to do it here. You can see that I've installed it to an external drive, and I had to do that purely because I don't have admin rights on this computer, which is set up for screen recording. But what you really should be doing is popping it into C Windows, and if you do that, then you won't have to tell R where it is all the time. Your PC will be able to find it, and it will be available for any other applications. It won't depend on you having this external hard drive plugged in. We have to tell it, as I said, because it's not in C Windows, I have to tell it each time. So I'm just going to skip a line though and go to this line, which lets us know if our computer is finding it. So as you can see here, there's no file path which has come up when I run that, which confirms for me that my machine that I'm working on here doesn't know where ExifTool is, so I have to tell it, and I tell it by using this function, which is one of the camtrapR functions. And if I go now and run syswitch, you can see now it gives me that file path, so we're ready to rock and roll. So the first thing we need to do is to set the working directory, and the simplest way to do that is to use this browse function within RStudio. So I'm going to, well, my working directory, I want it to be in my documents, because this is where how I have my camtrapR table stored and where I want all my CSV file and map outputs to go. This isn't where the photos are kept. Typically you'd be keeping the photos on an external drive just purely because of the amount of space that they take up, especially once you have a few projects under your belt. So I will make this my working directory. So I've browsed to it, but now I have to set as working directory by using this more command. And what I would do then is actually just copy and paste. Oops. Oh gosh. I'm going to use the keyboard. I would copy and paste that in here so that when I save this bit of code, I've got it stored there. I don't have to go through that process each and every time. Now you should have copied this additional functions bit of code off Blackboard. Now you don't open that at any point, but we simply go source, and it sits in the working directory that I just set, so that's all great. And you can see that it now sits in here. And we've done this just to make life a little bit simpler for you guys rather than having to run all this bit of code. Now we need to load our camtrapR table in. So in the HTML document you'll have some sort of generic name. If you just were to run that, you'll get an error message. I'll get rid of this because it's saying that there's no such file or directory. And so what that tells you is that it's not the correct name. But I can just have a look into my working directory here. I'm just going to take a moment and clean this working directory up because I have been messing around in it a little bit over the last couple of days, just getting prepped for this video. And I should have deleted all that stuff back then, so I'm just going to get rid of all of the various outputs that I've created. Oops, that's not the right spot. That's better. So I'm going to get rid of all these CSV files. Just make sure I'm not getting rid of my camtrapR station. That's the camtrapR station there, so that can go. And I'll just refresh the screen now. That didn't go. What happened? Okay. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go in and get rid of all this stuff too. Because again, this is stuff that I had been playing around with over the last couple of days, but I don't want it to be in here now, messing with what we're about to do. Okay, so back to this. So I need to give this DAT a proper name, and it's this one, ENS316 Conondale. It's just, that looks good, and I'm not getting an error, so I must have spelt it right. And then here is we're just using head to have a look at the top 6 rows. And you can see that this is our camtrapR station, which has our station name, the camera identifier. I've got the coordinates in as latitudes and longitudes in decimal degrees, and also as UTMs, X and Ys. And then there's elevation and time, which is just how it comes off the GPS when I download the waypoints. And then I've also entered in this date and time set and date and times retrieved, and then the problem 1 and problem from and to. And problem from and to are just simply setting out the dates if a camtrapR wasn't working during a period of time. And then we've also got some covariates. We've got the habitat, which I've also just simplified into eucalypt versus vine forest, and also the battery type, a long one and a shorter covariate, which we'll work with when it comes to doing some analysis on this data. So what we need to do then is to tell RStudio where our raw images are, and again, in the examples you're given, you get this generic something similar to this. That means nothing to R, so what we've got to do is actually put in a file path, and the best way to do that is to use your Explorer, your File Explorer, to navigate to those, and that's this ENS316 test images, and we can just then click in the address bar, select copy, and then paste that file path into here. PC users, we've got to turn these slashes around so they're compatible with R. Mac users, they should come out the right way around already. So I'll run that one. So we've just told it this is the file path to WD images raw, and then I'm going to give it a file path for where I want it to put the renamed images in, and we'll get to renaming in a sec. And I use exactly the same file path, but I just put a renamed on the end of that folder, and then I need to load that. Right, and so then we're ready to go on and do our image renaming. I've got some blocked out code here just highlighting the fact that at this point you would also go in and fix any time issues that are in the metadata of your recorded pictures, your captured photographs. Now for ENS316 students, I've done this for you already, but it's basically a matter of going in and comparing the time and date metadata on the first and last pictures in each camera folder and comparing that to your field notes just to check that they're accurate, because that's going to be important once we start extracting our various bits of data. I'll just take a moment here to show you the way that these images are set up. So like I said earlier on, we're using just a subset of all the photos that were captured, and they have to sit in a folder by themselves. So all of the individual camera stations have their own folder, and those folders all sit in an umbrella folder, and there's nothing else in there. If I open that up, I'll just go to View Details, so we're seeing it like this. You can see that within each folder there's nothing but images. If there's any other files in there, it's going to stuff things up as we go. And we can also see here that the tags are showing. So if you can't see the tags, it suggests if you actually had to do the metadata tagging yourself, that there might have been some problem there. But you guys at ENS316 don't need to worry about that. And so yeah, each of these is just going to be a folder full of pictures and tags. So what we need to do before we move on with extracting any data out of this, there's two things to do. One is we're going to rename all the pictures. So camtrapR is going to read the station name and the date and time details of each picture from these renamed pictures. So I'm just going to run this now. So the in directory are our raw images, the out directory where these new pictures get copied to is going to be this one, and it will create this folder for us. We don't need to actually manually create that. So I'll run that, and that will take a little moment. And you can see there a warning has come up that at least one of the stations doesn't have any images in it. And that might be a concern, but I know from having fiddled around with this data for a bit over the last couple of weeks that that's actually legit. That camera site BC4 failed to work at all. And we know that it didn't work as opposed to there just not being any animals there, because as part of our process of setting up and pulling down the camera, we stand in front of it and make sure it has every opportunity to take photos of us when we're there. And that's like our calibration, if you like. So that's a very important part of the whole process. So this is skipping through them. That's all looking good. It's just telling us for each of the stations how many images there are in that station. You might also get the odd warning saying that there's no data associated with some of the images. Any warnings you get there, it's just up to you to go back in using your File Explorer program and investigate what might be the problem. Sometimes the problem can be that there's non-photo images in there. So this will take just a couple of minutes. And this is why I'm only working on a set of the data rather than the whole lot, because the whole lot, it'll take probably 15 or 20 minutes on this machine to go through and rename them, remembering that it's copying all the images into a new folder. So depending on the speed of your laptop or your desktop computer, that can take a little bit of time. We know that as long as the stop sign is showing and there's no cursor down here, that the machine is thinking. I think it's a really good idea, especially when you're learning to use a bit of code, that you just run each line separately and wait for that to finish before moving on to the next command. There's two benefits to doing this. One is it allows you to really keep track of what's going on and make sure that everything's working as you go. But if you have a laptop or a desktop which doesn't have a lot of RAM, it can just slow everything down. It can even cause your computer to crash. So just get in the habit of, at least when you're first learning a bit of code, just to run each function at a time. So as you can see, it's taking a little bit of time, but that's normal. Let's just see what's happening back in Windows Explorer, see if we can see any signs. So remember that I named the folder that the renamed images were going into. It's the same as this one, and it sits alongside it, but it has a renamed. And you can see it's there, so RStudio has created it as it started copying. And 1, 2, so all the folders are there. It must just nearly be done. I'll just open one of these while we're waiting so you can see what it has done. So you can see now all of the images have gone, as you saw them earlier on, just from being a typical image name to now the name of each JPEG file has the station name, the date, and the time that it was taken associated with it. And as I said earlier on, camtrapR is going to read that information from the file name later on when we start summarizing the data. So we just have to give it a bit of time to, there we go, so that's done. Next thing we have to do is to create a plot of the camera operability. And this is important because, again, this will be used later on to help us differentiate between non-data, which is a result of there being no animals, as opposed to non-data as a result of the camera not being set or not operating on that day. So we do this, and now we're going to call on this function that we had loaded before. And that basically creates this plot. And so you can see this plot on the y-axis, every station name. I see a problem here that I've pulled just some of the camera traps to use, but I haven't modified the camtrapR table to only have those same stations. So you can see I've got all of the other stations in here. This is going to cause a problem later on when camtrapR is trying to match up the station folders with the record table that we're about to produce. So I'm going to go back in time a little here now. I need to go to my working directory, and I'm going to create a new camtrapR table which only has that set of 12 stations. So this will be it. Oh, actually, no, that's not it. Stop. So I'm going to, before I change anything, oops, I've already got it open, have I? I must have clicked twice. So what I'm going to do first of all is just save it as test. And now I can go through and change it without fear of destroying our data. Delete. It's always a good idea to use delete rather than just to use backspace, because we want to actually get rid of those rows altogether. Otherwise, oh, hang on, what have I done here? Sorry, this isn't right because it hasn't got our retrieval times. So I do need to open another one. I'm going to say don't save. I'm going to open this again. I think the problem was that I had an earlier version. Yeah, so there you go. So I'm going to File, Save As. I'm going to put test on the end. And it will probably ask me, do I want to replace the existing file? No. So delete these. Save. And then I just have to go back to the top here and reload that. Before I do that, just so that I'm really confident that I've got the right DAT, I'm going to get rid of the old DAT, and I can use this RM DAT. Remember at the start I used this code just to get rid of everything, but now I'm being specific. I just want to get rid of DAT, and you'll see it's gone now, and I'll just read it in again. And just have a look at it again to make sure that that looks right. Yep, cool. So I'm just going to run this again. And now we've just got those ones. So what this shows us, the grey shows us when that station had an operating camera. The red shows us when it had a camera set, but that camera wasn't operational. So you can see two of our stations, the camera wasn't operational for the whole time, and this one the camera stopped working on around about the third. No, so that's just the month. Not very helpful, but it stopped operating about 2/3 of the way through the 2-week period, and that will be because the batteries went flat. So we will have had photos of us setting that one up, and we would have had animal photos all the way through to here, but then there were no photos when we collected it and from this point onwards, so we just make the assumption it was flat from here, which may be right or wrong, but it's the best that we can do. A white colour in here would mean that there was no camera set at that time. So we can go on now and start extracting data, but I'm going to stop this video now and start a new one, which will be dealing with the data extraction.